So last week, as you know, it was the Masters, and on Friday it was a nice day. So I took the morning off and I went golfing
Nice.
with a buddy. It was planned because we knew the weather was going to be nice. Turns out it rained a little bit in the morning, so it kind of delayed everything.
Sure.
And at 1 o'clock, I was technically supposed to be online for work, so I took out my work phone and I got a call from one of my employees. And in one of the coolest moments of my life, I was on the phone with them and it was my turn to tee off. And I said, hold, please, put them on pause, put the phone in front of the tee, took my drive, and it was my nicest drive of the day to date. Picked up the phone again and said, talk to me, and walked on to my ball doing business. And I felt
real George
darn
Bush
cool
vibes, like this. Real George Bush vibes of like, we will not stand for terrorism. Now watch this drive.
Exactly. That's what I was doing. Mission
right?
Accomplished.
Yeah. Welcome to the executive branch.
Indeed. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Working on the Dad Pod. As always, I am that guy, and over there is Beep Beep. How you doing? Sorry, for those of you not watching, I'm Ethan, and this is Alex. Today we're going to be talking about a weird topic. It's how we interact, particularly disciplining other people's kids in public spaces. And I'll explain in a little bit what we mean by that, but it's definitely something that I have felt the need to do a little more recently in my life. Before we get into anything else, just a quick housekeeping reminder. Please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you select the giant bell for notifications and instant updates when we go live. We also now have a website, workingonthedadpod.com, where you can see all of our social media handles, back to the YouTube. And of course, if you're
There's
more
even
of
a
an
subscribe
audio
button on the website, so you just go there. You got everything.
Whoa.
Yeah, there's no little bell for notifications. You still should go to YouTube for that, but the button actually takes you to YouTube so you can subscribe. So it's kind of 2 clicks.
Boom. 2 clicks. Anyway, how you doing tonight, Alex?
I am doing well. I am more excited to talk about this topic than I thought it would be. After doing a little bit of thinking on the topic of all the instances in which I've had to do it, but it's been a good week. We last week, as I mentioned, we were potty training my son. He has been accident free all week.
Mm-hmm.
Pooping on the potty, peeing on the potty. But we're getting into a little habit where he's feeling himself and how he gets congratulated for doing his business. He'll sometimes like pee every 15 minutes so he can get the round of applause. And it's been a little weird, but it's nice to have 2 diaper-free kids. How are you doing?
I just want to say I respect the move. Your son's a showman, and nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm pretty tired, despite the fact that we're now on 14 days in a row of the kid sleeping through the night after 6 weeks of waking up. Today was like kind of an annoying day in the sense that we decided to have some landscaping, yard work done on our outdoor patio. And we found a guy that had been doing our next door neighbor's place pretty much every single time they got a new renter. He was their go-to. He's not very punctual. When he was supposed to come today between 9 and 9:30, didn't show up till 12:30 without like a courtesy call. So that was pretty frustrating, and I was contemplating whether or not I still had to pay him the full amount. I did, but I was very tempted to be like, and here's my cut for every hour you were late. But I didn't do that. But I wanted to,
Sure.
but I didn't.
I understand that. I mean, I had a not nearly as impactful of a similar experience. We are likewise doing some outdoor work. We are building an outdoor shower in our backyard, and not only an outdoor shower, but like an outdoor shower and a bathtub. Like we're going all out. Like we're going to cover the bathtub so like critters don't get in it when we're not using it. But as I probably mentioned on this podcast, we live in a small house. We only have one bathroom. We have a half bath here in my wife's studio, but having another place to shower was really cool. And we can do this project for under $2,000. So it beats the heck out of adding on a bathroom and redoing our roof and all the other things that would come with that. And because we live in Florida, it's usually good weather to shower outside as long as you don't pick a time when it's raining. And if it's raining, you're kind of just showering outside anyway. So that was pretty cool. But we had the bathtub delivery today of this big, clawfoot soaking tub kind of deal. And the delivery guys showed up about 5 minutes before my meeting. And my wife texted me, "Hey, the delivery guys are here." And I'm like, "Okay, do you need me to do something, or are they going to handle it?" And I didn't hear anything. So I had to like run out and talk to them. And I was talking to the guys, trying to flag them down and get the tub off the truck and all that stuff. And then the guy was like, "Oh yeah, your wife came out and already helped me." And I was like, "You wanted to text me that maybe not only did you not need me, but you were taking care of it?" That's fine.
Yeah, that would have been useful. Yeah, so
I feel like let's jump into some story time. I feel like that wasn't what I had in mind talking about an outdoor shower. It's not specifically parenting related, but it sort of bleeds in. I think it's interesting, just sort of an aside. I think it's interesting, you guys choosing to use a contractor. We do so much stuff ourselves. I think partly because my wife just wants to. Obviously, it saves us a ton of money on the labor for the things we can do. But it's always one of the downsides is like having the kids around when you're trying to do it. Obviously, you're less talented experience than a contractor, but also, having the kids around as you're trying to like put posts in the ground and fill them with concrete and all that stuff. It's like, no, you don't get to stick your hands in the lovely concrete. Go away.
Yeah, I just, I know my limits and I know my skill set. And even though like there's definitely pride and, cost savings in DIY work, ultimately I know what I can and cannot do. And if I like get it wrong and it ends up costing me more in the end, I'd rather like just go for like the quote, the negotiation, know that it's going to get done well off the bat. I will say like I'm pretty confident in my like DIY plumbing. I do some pretty good plumbing, and I'm willing to take the risk that I can get it done on my own. I've replaced parts of bathtubs and toilets before. I do my own snaking, but other than that, if it's a real like I never try any electrical work. I just like don't want to risk it at all.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a hodgepodge. And I think for a lot of our stuff, it's, like a lot of the DIY things we do, it feels like recently are all pretty standard, like putting up fence panels when they get blown down during a hurricane. It's like, okay, you dig the post, you set it in concrete, you make sure it's level, right? Like maybe it takes you a little bit longer because you don't have all the same power tools and equipment that a contractor might use because they're doing, thousands of these posts throughout the year. And so I'm using a shovel or a post hole digger or a tamping bar or whatever I'm using. And it takes me a little bit more time, but the end result is it at least X number of feet in the ground? Is the concrete poured? Is it level? Everything holding up? And that's a lot of what this project is. There was some like plumbing and soldering going like copper to brass to plastic. Yeah. I think that's what it is. I didn't do it. My father-in-law did it because he's experienced in it and he knows how to do all that stuff. And so he did it because the way we're setting it up, we have an outdoor washer and dryer, like in a shed, not in the elements, but it's in a shed. And so there's hot and cold water running to that shed. And we're using that shed as one of the walls of the shower and just using that water there. So yeah, there's some tricky stuff, but that wasn't still wasn't my story. We're 10 minutes in. We haven't even gotten to story time. I'm going to get to actual parenting stuff. This week, my son has been, for the first time, really very vocal about not wanting to go to school. And not in the same way that like a lot of kids, my daughter's gone through this, right? We've talked about her sort of faking illnesses or making a lot out of just that general, like, hey, I don't feel great, not sick, but I just don't feel good, to sort of get out of school or get out of responsibilities or whatever. My son's not doing bad. He's 2 and 2 months, but he's definitely, like, because he's now been very consistently for about 6 months on this schedule of 3 days he goes to school, 2 days he goes to my mother-in-law's house. He very much prefers going to my mother-in-law's house. Maybe it's the one-on-one attention. Maybe it's she takes him to parks. Maybe it's she fixes him more interesting lunches than I pack him. I don't know. But he seems to prefer it. And so he started this thing where he's going up to school every day. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, no school, Mimi's house. And yesterday it got to a point where, like, he's a very happy-go-lucky kid, right? And so he's walking in and he's pouting big time, but he's still walking in, right? This is as much protest as he can muster, just like crossing his arms and stomping in and begrudgingly just doing exactly what he's supposed to, which I really appreciate. As, like, if that's gonna be your temper tantrum,
yeah, go for it.
Tantrum away, my guy.
Yeah.
But the teachers at the door welcoming the kids were, like, shocked at this behavior. Like, that's how out of character it was. They're like, that's the first time I've ever seen him upset, kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, he's, like, big mad that he has to be here by his standards. And my daughter's still in that phase where, like, if she didn't have to go to school, she'd be fine with it. I'm like, y'all, one of you is in preschool and the other one is in the baby class, like the 1-year-old and up class kind of thing. Y'all need to get a grip, because school doesn't get more fun from here.
No,
like,
not at all.
School is just school. So you're going to have to deal with it, because you're not even in kindergarten. So, like, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my story. So, it's tough. I don't have a lot of dealing with it. I'm just sending him off to school and letting him pout in.
So my story is almost identical to yours. My younger this week cried 3 times at drop off, which is entirely out of character for her. Yeah. Just like she's now, maybe it's like finally clicking that when I say, like, goodbye, I love you, and I'm like leaving, it's like I'm leaving. Although, like, just last week, if I'd say bye, I'd be like saying bye as she's like running off to play with her friends. But this week, had 4 days of school. We've had 3 breakdowns. But the weird thing is, the older one watches that happen, and then we go to drop her off, and then she pretends to be sad. And I'm like, I was like, you don't need to be sad just because your sister's sad. Like, you're fine. It's totally okay. And then she's like, don't leave me. And then I looked to the teacher, and one of the teacher was doing an assessment with, so on Monday, there were, when I dropped her off, for some reason, there were only 3 kids in the class at the time, all 3 boys, 2 of whom are like the biters and hitters, who were the two of them playing together.
Okay.
And then the other one was the youngest in the class that was getting an assessment. And I was like, well, looks like your friend's getting, doing something with the teacher over there. Why don't you go get an assessment or draw and wait for your turn? And she just turns and, like, goes, doesn't even say goodbye to me. So then these next 2 times that the younger one has cried and she's pretended to cry, the teacher's been like, do you want to come take a test with me? And she's like, oh, and, like, then ditches me. And I just like kind of turned to the teacher and I was like, nerd. And
what a lame incentive that she's like,
I know.
At. Like, holy cow.
I hope in like 10 years.
Would you like me to clip your toenails? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. I don't know. I hope in 10 years when she goes back and listens to all of our podcasts as part of her allowance for audio reports. She's embarrassed by this story.
Yeah. I imagine putting huge audio allowances on 14-year-olds will be super common then.
Yeah, who knows? Kids these days. That Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
All right.
Speaking of kids these days, let's talk about
yeah,
some other kids.
yeah,
How
let's
they're
talk about some
messing
other
up.
kids.
Why don't you explain the premise? Because
Yeah. So when I brought this up to Alex the other day, saying I wanted to talk about it, it was actually happening in real time. So anytime the weather's above 60 degrees and nice, I we like to take the girls to the playground on the way back from preschool, and there are some parents who totally check out at the playground. And as my daughter has gotten older, I've kind of been I've been more hands off on the playground. She's like doing her thing, but now I'm more hands on with the little one as she is like learning the stuff at the playground. But some of the other kids, they are just having free reign where they will, almost tackle like my 19-month-old and they are 5, or they will just like push my older daughter out of the way to like get to the slide. And at some point, I have to say, hey, like, do not do that to my kid. And I'll like death stare the parent, being like, why am I having to tell your kid to not be?
Yeah, that's rough, man.
And it's like you're just kind of like watching this, and like you're totally fine with this behavior. You're totally fine with your 6-year-old boy like going up to my 4.5-year-old girl and pushing her. Yeah, you know what he's going to turn into? A monster, is what that look is saying.
Anyway. Yeah, I think a more succinct way. So I distilling that very specific example of a child turning into a monster on a playground, like an R.L. Stine book. I think a more specific or less specific, more general thing is sort of how do you deal with it when there are kids around your kids not meeting your expectations for how they should behave. And I think to your point and what you're saying, and for me too, like there is a threshold here, right? Like, because there are little annoying things that all kids do that I'm like, if this was my kid, I'd tell him to stop. So somebody else's kid, I'm not tell him to stop, but the things that affect my kid, it's a little bit.
Yeah, like, so I'm not going to like say like the B word. I'm not going to throw out like straight up bullies, but like at some point you gotta like, yeah,
don't use the other one.
Yeah,
definitely don't use the other one.
Yeah, they're little. Anyway, it's more of the, trying to, like you mentioned, the threshold of just like you're playing like a little intensely to like you are now like not endangering, but like putting my kid literally like in harm's way of your like throwing of the wood chips because you think it's funny, or like to like make it rain wood chips like with you and your friends, and there's like a baby walking and stuff like that, or just like running up the stairs around a little kid like I mentioned. And it's kind of like, you have to protect your kid, but you also like can't just be like yelling at strange kids in public places. So what's the threshold? What's the line? How do you get there? It's kind of just like where I'm talking, what I wanted to discuss.
Yeah. So for me, I think it tends to be a relatively high threshold. I am much more like, I'm not above, confrontation, but I don't actively seek it out. Right. I don't know how somebody else is going to respond. I don't know what somebody else is going to say. I don't know what they're going to do. Like, just like I'm protective over my kids and you are of yours, they're going to be protective over theirs. And they have a philosophy or a parenting style that is like hoping that their kid will, I don't know, have some notice of the situation, apologize on their own, correct the behavior, use social cues, whatever. And in certain situations, that doesn't work for me. I mean, the playground being a great example, my son wants to do everything, but for, the longest time, everything meant like climbing up and down the stairs onto the playground and just like stopping in the middle. And I have to recognize like, okay, this isn't super great behavior. So I kind of need to like encourage you on that you can't just like stop in the middle of the stairs and block everyone. But at the same time, like kids like just absolutely sprinting by with no regard for other kids. Right. And I see that a lot. I wouldn't even say like 5 seems low. There are a lot of playgrounds where I go to where it's like 9, 10, 11-year-old boys, mostly boys, just being absolute hooligans. And, you know, they're the kids that if you've got like a 3-story tube slide, they're climbing up the outside of it, 3 stories up, jumping off, you know, climbing on the playground in every way except the way it's meant to be used, sprinting as hard as possible. But I think there are other examples that I've had, not just playgrounds, but even still at playgrounds. There's one that we go to that has basically a gigantic tire swing, and it's brand new, and it's not like this old school just like tire hanging on a swing. It's just a big circular looking thing on a very sturdy metal contraption. But one day my daughter and I guess my son was there too, are all playing, and she makes friends like nobody's business at a playground. She makes friends with some older girls, and these older girls, they start piling on this tire swing, and then some boys come over and more people, and all of a sudden, this is a thing that I think if I was going to set a cap, I'm no fire marshal, but if I was going to set a capacity cap, I'd probably put it at 3 or 4. They had a dozen people on there, and then the biggest one of them was just absolutely shoving this tire swing. Then to make matters worse, and this is what kind of like, well, I guess the order of operations here. So I go over, I'm following my son around like you do with your youngest, and following him around, I end up going by the swing. They're going crazy, and I haven't said anything. And my daughter goes, "Daddy, can you push us?" And I go, "No, I'm not going to be pushing you." She goes, "Why not?" I go, "Because," and I basically said this, and I looked at, there were like 3 or 4 other girls still there. I said, "Because I think you're being dangerous and reckless. I think somebody's going to get hurt. And I think you guys shouldn't be swinging that hard. And I'm not going to be able to push you as fast as you guys were just going, because I'm uncomfortable with that. And I think you guys are making bad decisions." I said that, right? I was like a little fired up, and I was like, "I think you guys are making bad decisions, and I'm not going to support it." And I was like, I walked away. I was like, that was probably a little too heated. I could have just said, "No, I think you're being dangerous, and I am not going to push you that high. I don't think it's safe," and left it at that. But I kind of went a little hard. And then I noticed that they kind of stopped. It kind of slowed down. Then one of the original boys came over, and he brought his dad. And this is what got me. That dad did not have the same reservations. And he was doing them whole hog. And those are the situations where like it becomes even more of a gray area, because I think there's the ones you mentioned where, I'll be perfectly honest, my son's at an age where I'm not having to follow him around all the time, given the population. And, you know, if it's not densely populated, right, at the playground, he can do some of his own things, and he just kind of wants to wander, and he's a very observant kid. Sometimes he just likes to stand there and watch other people play. I think he's made for the YouTube generation of like watching people stream video games, right, instead of actually just playing the video games yourself. Not one I terribly understand, but go for it, whoever likes it, kind of thing. So I don't know how to handle it. Like I've definitely been guilty sometimes of like, okay, maybe I'm looking at my phone, I'm texting, I'm doing something else. I look up and something's happened, and I'm like, oh, I've got to attend to this. And that's one thing that maybe you're not always 100% of the time giving 100% of your attention. But then there's that other line of like, I just said this was a bad behavior. And then another adult figure comes in and goes, yeah, why not?
Let's do it.
And then not only does it undermine your authority, but like now you're not fun. Like you're so uncool.
You got shown up.
You were trying to be the safety dad and all that stuff. Yeah. And another dad comes in and does it. And it's so absolutely frustrating.
So that made me think of 2 things. One, yesterday as a family, we watched the episode of Bluey where Bingo tells her dad that he's playing too rough with her. So that just made me think of that. But 2, so as I may have mentioned on this podcast before, I live just outside of the DC area. And at this playground, there is a kid I've seen regularly, boy, probably about 10 years old, causes a lot of mischief. Figured out who his mom was. His mom is legit constantly walking around, not paying attention to him at all, on her phone, speaking Russian, wearing a Yankee hat. So in my mind, and it's also a red Yankee hat. So in my mind, I think she's a spy. And I'm just going to go out there and say that there's a spy amongst us at the playground. And,
so when we don't have an episode next week, you know what happened to Ethan.
Yes, exactly. So she regularly is just like not giving an F as her kid's causing mischief. And one day her kid was legit tying a string from like one piece of the playground to another piece of the playground, hoping other kids would run into it. And I like
spy kid build a tripwire. I see you.
Yeah, exactly. So I had to stop my kid from going over there and like purposely picked her up and walked by this other mom to be like, that boy is being dangerous for all the kids around here, and you should not be playing near him. And then, like, I see her turn up and continue speaking Russian and ignore me, and her, didn't even talk to her kid for the next half hour. So it's just kind of like, I don't understand how, granted that we all have different parenting styles. We all have different thresholds of like what is okay. But playgrounds are public spaces. There are different aged kids. There needs to be some kind of social understanding that the older kids cannot just have free reign of a playground that is for multi-age. And I also just think like, and I like you, will pretty much just say the thing. I try to be like as kind as possible while also asserting like authority. For example, like, hey, maybe next time you can slow down when you're running by my kid. Or, hey, I would prefer if you didn't throw wood chips in my daughter's face because you think it's funny. I did say it exactly like that to one kid before, and he did almost cry. But the thing is, at some point, it's like there's you can have fun. And like, I'm not trying to be the fun police. And I'm also not trying to tell other people how to, what's okay to let their kids play. But at the same time, I think we need to defer to like the safety of little ones whenever possible. And I don't think that's like a redonkulous, like radical statement.
Yeah. And I mean, because I very much, when my kids are playing, short of like mortal danger or some big wound, I'm in the fool around and find out camp on that, right? Mm-hmm. When it's just affecting them.
Sure.
But I think when we're talking about what's the line, it seems like for both of us, the line is like when our kids are in danger from this behavior. One thing that I try to do that's a little different from you, I noticed you talking about do this to my kid. I try to be kind. I try a lot of the same principles, but I actually try to use more generic language so that it's not like, this is dangerous to my kid, so don't do it around my kid. I try to go, hey, there are little kids around. Yeah. Let's slow down, right? Because like, if my 2-year-old gets run over, it's just as unsafe if another 2-year-old gets run over. And I feel like I want the offender, for lack of a better term, to understand that it's not, stop doing this around my kid. Like, your behavior is not safe. And try to say that in a way that is more globally applicable.
Yeah, no, I tend to do the same thing. I very much was specific with like Wood Chip Boy and Son of Spy. But for the most part, I'm generally like, let's not run so fast when babies are, climbing stairs or stuff like that. It's like usually how I'll say stuff.
Yeah. And so, and I will say, I want to shout out that like, there are plenty of parents out there who are doing a good job. So I don't want to act like, we're not sitting here. I've had plenty of good experiences on playgrounds of like kids doing that and their parents immediately coming up and correcting them, like way, way more than I have to do this, but that's not the topic of this episode. So I do want to say that. One other area that I found, because I feel like we've been hammering on like playgrounds and these kind of spaces, but there are some other settings, right? Like, and I think it's different. We have close friends, right? And that have kids, and those kids might, come around, hang out, play. And there may be situations where, you know, let's say it's a dad's get together with me and a couple other guys, and everybody's bringing 2 kids to this party. And as we both know, when you're solo dad parenting, watching both kids like a hawk in, you know, a kid infested scenario where everybody's running around being crazy, not always easy. And so sometimes you're in a situation where like the 2 kids right in front of you interacting are not necessarily both your kids, or maybe even either of them are your kids, and
Right.
sort of saying, hey guys, we need to do this, but like being really calm, but also being really loud so that their parent can hear. And like,
yeah,
I'm very cautious, because I think one of my worries in not just that situation, it's definitely magnified because I know the parents and are friends with the parents. But one of the things that I am like really cognizant of is like, just like that dad with the swing undermined me, I don't want to be undermining other parents, right? It leaves a bad taste in my mouth if I feel like I've done that. But I have some of those situations where, you know, instead of just going through the situations, but I have these times where, you know, kids maybe not be doing something where, let's say they're all playing in my backyard, right? And we have a pool, and our pool is about knee height. It's half buried, but the rim is knee height, but we have rocks all around it, like little gravel. And little kids love to take the rocks and throw them in the giant water fountain that's actually the pool. And then I have to take a net and get them out. And so I have to ask them, like, hey, please stop throwing rocks in the pool. Please stop throwing rocks in the pool, getting louder and louder and louder until the parents hear, so they can be like, holy crap, we have a pool too. And that would be super annoying. And stop throwing rocks in the pool. And it's like, I get it. The rocks are all around the pool. It's literally the entire outside of the pool. It's really convenient and seems really fun. And they're nice, like hand-sized rocks for the little ones. And I'm like, I get it. It just feels like a baseball and you just want to fastball that in there. But yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I would say I'm actually more comfortable in like play date scenarios, because most of my kids' friends are, you know, from school. And for the most part, like, at least in the concept of school, we're all playing by the same rules. They're all being taught the same things. So I've got like no problem like saying, hey, other kid, like, let's not run out of like the classroom without our mommy and daddy being like, you know, like slow down. Like I'm fine with like all of like the basic commands and safety, because I know that they
hold, good boy.
Yeah, basic dog sled stuff. So
Much.
yeah, much, pretty much. And I know that they'll do the same with me. And it's like, you know, I have definitely seen my daughters be told like slow down and like please wait by some of the other parents. And I've got no problem with that. And for the most part, like just like you, a lot of the parents at the playgrounds are like people we know from school, the neighborhood. It's just that once you like enter a dynamic of older kids specifically, parents like just like totally checked out, and the kids have this opportunity to like run wild and they don't care at all about the other kids. It's where I get frustrated. And you know, and I try to you know, let my kids know like after the fact, like, you know, that was not the best, and you always got to be like careful with little kids. Like I'll say to my older one, like treat every other little kid like you treat your sister, kind of stuff, and you know, just stuff like that.
Yeah. I have another one that is really like, it's a little more specific, but maybe there's something we can draw out of it a little more globally. But when I take my kids to the gym in the mornings, they go into childcare, and the way the childcare place is constructed, you've got a glass door that you just pull open, walk through, and then you're in this little fence area that's really to keep the kids on the other side of it. It's where the signage sheet is, and there's a chest high gate with a latch right at the top, so all the little kids can't get to it and touch it. My daughter can reach it, but my son couldn't even come close. And so you open this door to let the kids in, and that's fine. We're usually the first ones there. We're there at 8. It opens at 8. We're usually first or second ones there, along with other regulars. But sometimes we'll get some situations where there's brand new kids in the gym, That's fine. Bring your kids to the gym. I think that's a great way to get your workout in. But just like your youngest struggles sometimes with school drop off, being dropped off in a brand new place usually leads to some pretty upset kids. And what do they want to do? They want to get the heck out of there. So when I open that gate to let my kids in or take my kids out, sometimes I get that kid that wants to toddle through. And my kids are not speed demons, especially if I've said the word hurry. That to them is a red light. I don't get it. But they'll be slowly going out. And this other kid who's motivated, bobbing and weaving, coming through. And now we're in this thing where I'm like trying to keep my kids from pushing the outside door open and trying to like friendly usher this kid back in. Usually the other kid, the upset kid, tops out at 2, right?
Yeah.
Like toddlers that are just having a rough time and can't understand the concept of what's really going on right now. And so it's sort of like, I could easily pick you up and just move you where I want you, but I feel really awkward about doing that because you're not my kid. And there's a giant glass window pointing at the gym behind me. So your parents are going to see it. And I don't know if your parents are the ones sitting there with the 10-pound dumbbells doing their first ever workout, or if they're the one doing the 500-pound deadlift and would suplex me into next week. I don't know.
I've been asked by like strange kids before at like the playground, and I have a lot of interactions at the playground, obviously, if you've listened to this episode to this point. But where a kid will just say like, hey, like, can you push me on the swing too? Like if I'm pushing my daughter, and I'll just be like, I can't do that. I'm sorry. Like, are your parents around? And
do pretty much anything to avoid laying a finger in any manner on anybody else's kid that I don't have to. And it's not some like major fear that like something bad's going to happen. It's just that to me is a very weird line that like, if someone picked up my kid and physically moved them, I would feel very weird about that. And so like, I, you know, no like malintent or any like sort of, you know, thinking that there's some nefarious intent to it. It's just, it feels weird. And so, it's just, it's weird. But then we have another scenario where there's one of the people who works at childcare, you know, who brings their kids. That's fine. They're roughly the same age as my kids or thereabout. But one of the kids, very outgoing, which is great, super nice, super friendly with my kids. But then she always wants to like give a hug goodbye. It's fine. You know, we've talked about the physical boundaries kind of stuff with kids before. And I tell my kids before and after, you know, if she wants to give you a hug, you can say yes, you can say no, you can give her a hug. It's up to you. That's your choice. But she will run out of the gate in order to get that hug. Like, it's not just like, oh, I missed my chance. It is like, no, I need to say goodbye to you. Like, this is do or die. I may not see you for a full 24 hours. This is big stuff. And then she's outside the gate. And dad's in the back of the room sort of watching everybody else. But everybody else is usually like 2 extra kids besides his at that point by the time I take mine out. And so I'm kind of like standing there waiting to get my kids out, not sure if she's going to go back in, and just sort of looking at dad being like, okay, you're in charge of everybody here, but you're definitely in charge of this one. And like, I'm the one sitting there going, okay, go back in now. Okay. And eventually after like 4 or 5 times, he'll be like, all right, come on back in. And I'm like, damn, I gotta go, homie. Like, come on.
Yeah, that's always a weird scenario. I've definitely been like semi-caught in that scenario as well. Just trying to keep an eye, because you know it's a village, and it's like, but it's also like, hey man, like I got places to be. I can't be responsible for your kid when I'm trying to go. I've got my 2 over here, so I feel you.
Yeah, well, it's not even just like being responsible, but it's just the thing of like, I mean, I know from experience that like if the kids get out of child watch, nobody gives a shit. Like,
right. Yeah.
Like obviously the dad who is there would notice his daughter is gone. I'm not talking about a specific instance, but like somebody else's kid. I'm sure the worker would care and all that stuff. But I just mean if like nobody noticed and that kid got out, when I'm walking to and from, I specifically park in a certain part of the parking lot, the way it's constructed, so that instead of having to cross the entire parking lot to get to the door, I cross a field. That way I can let my kids out of the car, set them down. They've got a tote bag with like their water bottles and diapers, now change of undies and pants in case my son has an accident kind of thing. You know, and I have a little tote bag, and then I have my gym duffel that's got all my accoutrement in it. And so I'm like, great, the kids can run. They just go straight across this field. And then there's like one of those handicap buttons to open the big double doors. And so like they can both smack that. They can walk right in there. They can do their thing. My daughter, when we're leaving, she'll like sprint out to the point where like she's gone. She's around the corner and then she's out the door. She's hit the button on this side. She's out the door. She's going across the field. She gets to the car. She hops in. She does a great job. My son moves slow as molasses, but goes in a straight line too. From the outside looking in, what you would see first, if you were just standing looking at that field for a 2-minute period, is first you would see a 5.5-year-old sprinting across an open field towards a parking lot and then standing by a car. Now she stands on the front side. My car is parked front bumper on this field. She's not touching the parking lot. She knows, hand on the car, right? I can unlock it. She opens the door. She can buckle herself in. We're set with her. But then the way we do it is I get my son out the door, unlock the car. I'm like, come on, little man, come on. He's not coming. So I take my bag and I go to the car well ahead of him, drop all the stuff off, then come back across the field, pick him up and carry him to his seat. So you would see that 5.5-year-old running. Then you'd see a 35-year-old man lugging some stuff behind her. And then you'd see a 2-year-old just hanging out in the field, picking up a palm frond and waving it around. And like my head is like, I'm down putting the bags in the car. I'm looking out the windshield. I keep eye contact on him all the time. But again, third party looking out at this, you would be like, there's just a 2-year-old hanging out in a field next to a parking lot. What are we doing?
Bad luck.
Not once have my kids gotten in danger, but also, and this is the reason I say no one would give a shit. Nobody has said a word to me, and I've been doing this for 6 months.
Yeah.
Like, and so I'm just like, this is why I'm paranoid of like some kid getting out of there, because like if I let that happen and I see it, I'm like, like past that parking lot is a fence.
Right.
But it's a fence that you like has a gate that you drive through. And if they go around that, they're on a 4-lane road. I'm like, there's a lot of bad things that could happen and nobody would notice. So I'm like, and maybe it's because people know me because I go in there like 6 days a week and usually bring both of my kids with me. And they're like, oh, those are Alex's kids kind of thing. And maybe that's why, but yeah, I think it's always back to the point. It's always just like very tough. It's just tough.
Yeah.
It's tough to parent other people's kids, especially when you're not expecting to.
Yeah. And when you got your own parent, like can't.
And I think it's different. I've had some scenarios, where like not super recently, but when my daughter was younger and my wife's best friend's daughter, who's the same age, were younger, we would do this thing where we would trade off like once a month, where like we'd watch the other kid and let the other couple have a date night kind of thing. And I think that's a totally different scenario when the parents aren't around. Not like there's no rules, but it's just like I'm in charge. Like it has been firmly established that I am in charge. So I don't think any of this conversation pertains to those kind of situations, like drop off for a play date kind of thing. And it's like, no, my house, my rules. And we've established that I'm the authority figure in this situation. You'll follow me. I'm still not going to like put my fingers on you if I don't have to, kind of thing. But in those scenarios, it was like, okay, I was dealing with babies. This started when the girls were like 6 months old. And it was like, sometimes it was like, no, I'm having to like get them both down to nap kind of, holding and that kind of thing, changing diapers, wiping butts, all that kind of stuff. But, it's interesting.
Yeah, that's a little different. But
yeah. No, it's totally different, but it's right. Interesting how the presence of the other parents changes your mindset, or like where you think the parents are in this situation. But I think it's obviously like, we've dropped them off. You are in their care. It's the same way the babysitter would have rules that, if they were taking care of my kids. So.
Well, speaking of your, I go to the gym 6 days a week flex. How's working on the dad pod going for you?
It's good. It's good.
Okay.
I weighed in today at, I don't remember what my last weigh-in was because it's been a minute since I've actually reported what my weight was on here. I know it ballooned up to like 192 or something when I was on medication, but today I was 185.8. Not where I want to be. Obviously, I was shooting for 180 just a few weeks ago and was darn close to it, but it's a lot better than 192. I'll tell you that. As far as feeling like where I need to be. So it's manageable. I'd said like 6 or 7 pounds is like sucks, but like is what it is, worth it to get my hearing back, which has improved, right? Like long-term benefits for 4 pounds, 3.8 pounds. And some of all of that, I think at this point was just overeating during that period, not counting calories, not paying attention. But I've really refocused myself. And one thing I've done recently over the last couple of weeks that I think has helped me a little bit is I have been pretty good ever since we had our working on the diet episode about getting my protein in, right? Making sure my protein intake was high, because my first and primary goal was like building muscle, or at least retaining muscle while I lose fat. And to do that, it's most helpful to get plenty of protein. But my next goal, since I'm like, okay, it's been a minute and I'm not having trouble like getting my protein, and I've been very focused on that. So now I'm focused on also getting in fiber, because, and I will try and get some links to some sources to put in the description here. But basically what I've heard from people who have studied the scientific literature on it is there is no study that has ever concluded that fiber is bad for you, right? And it's essentially one of those things that like there is a pretty good correlation. I won't say causation, but correlation between a high fiber diet and lifespan, right? Like, and health markers, right? It's, it's not that fiber fixes everything, but like, where do you get fiber from? Mostly fruits, vegetables, whole grains, like that kind of stuff. And you're like, oh yeah, if you include a lot of that in your diet, that should be pretty healthy. Like, duh. But specifically the fiber stuff. And so, I've tried to add in more high fiber things, like adding in some chia seeds to my Greek yogurt breakfast with protein powder, or fiber supplements or things like that. And that has actually had a, I was doing it because I'm like, oh yeah, fiber is good for me. It has had a dramatic impact on my hunger levels. Like I have been, especially recently, the past couple of days, we've been running low on chia seeds, and my wife and my kids like that in their morning oatmeal. So I've been using like powdered fiber supplements that we have on hand. We just had them, so I used them instead to get my fiber in. Especially those things. I've had all this week, I've been using it, and every single day, like lunchtime comes around, and I've only eaten my breakfast, which is like non-fat Greek yogurt, frozen blueberries, protein powder, and this like fiber powder. And I think the total calorie count is like 300 and like 45 grams of protein. Like, so we're all 300 calories. Lunchtime comes around, I'm just like, I guess I'll eat, but I'm not that hungry. And so it's been kind of weird, because I've had a couple of days, like I think it was yesterday, where I literally at like 9 o'clock at night, just like shoved 2 tortillas in my mouth, because I was only at like 1,100 calories, but had eaten 3 meals. And I was like, I have like I have a workout tomorrow that like is like a leg day workout. And like, I'm not going to be able to do anything if I'm running on 1,100 calories, no matter how full I feel. So I was just like eating plain tortillas before I like wrapped up for the evening, so that I could get some calories in. So it's been kind of interesting to see how like making sure I get all my fiber in has actually helped a lot.
Wow.
And maybe that's a short-term shift, right? We're talking, a week or two. And obviously there are plenty of things. You talk to anybody 2 weeks on a diet and they will tell you it's the greatest thing in the world. And it's the secret. And I found the fountain of weight loss kind of thing. But there is scientific data to back up the satiety of high fiber foods. Like that is a known byproduct of high fiber diets is high satiety. So
it's interesting. I actually didn't know that much about high fiber and not being as hungry. So
you ever heard of blue zones? It's this idea. It's this idea of what?
Is that part of Orange Theory?
No, I think those are like heart rate zones, but blue zones is this theory about longevity where there are certain areas of the world that have longer lifespans and like these blue zones. And so people try to, I think there's like a blue zone diet where they're basically trying to emulate the foods from these zones. I think like offshoot of that would be like the Mediterranean diet, because the Mediterranean is like one of these blue zones. But one of the things they found among these blue zone diets is that like they're all high in fiber, right? Beans, legumes of any sort. So lentils, throw lentils in there, like those kind of things, super high in fiber. And so some of these cultures that, like have a lot of beans, a lot of legumes. I mean, think of like Greek food and all the various dips and things like that are just like mashed up chickpeas or lentils or whatever. It's like, okay, yeah, there's a ton of fiber in their diet. And so, there's a lot of different literature out there about, I'm not going to, I feel like I'm just going like, guys, I just discovered fiber. You are not going to believe what it does. That's not it. It's something I've done. It's like a very common sense thing, but it was just like I was very much doing the like, I need protein, bro. Like I need to get my protein in and I need to control my calories. And that's all of it. And I'm like, let's expand this, and I think the next step, once I consistently get my fiber in, will be, looking at all the other small sort of like little nutrients, like making sure that my vitamin C is there, because these are all things that I can track for free in Chronometer. I think that's how you say it. But my diet tracking app, my calorie tracking app, these are all things that just get tracked for free. There's even more micronutrients that I could track with the paid version, but I can track things like B12, vitamin C, vitamin A, fiber, all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty cool. And just like, it's got little bars. And I'm like, could I construct a daily meal plan where everything gets to 100% on all those nice little things like calcium and magnesium and yada, yada, yada. Who knows? Maybe not a life goal, but at least trying to figure out, okay, how can I incorporate more nutrients in what I'm eating?
Yeah. Well, in addition to your 6-day-a-week flex, I'm going to call back your 192 shaming and say that last week when I was 192.6, I went up a pound.
Oh, relative, man.
193.6. I don't really know.
Listen, if you were 300 pounds last week, that'd be a heck of a number.
It would be. Just kidding. It would be. I can't really say what happened this week. I mean, I was pretty active. I went on Monday when I went into the city for work, I did a 30-minute like lunchtime walk, and then I did a 3.3 mile run on Tuesday, did another 30-minute walk in the office yesterday. Today I didn't have time to work out, as I mentioned, with the gardeners today being late, and then they actually had a couple of questions for me, so it's not like I could really leave, and I had a lot of meetings, so I didn't get a chance to work out today. I don't know. I'm going to chalk it up to Passovers next week, so I've had a little bit more beer, maybe. I don't know. Just trying to get my...
really, have you been tracking every calorie you put in your body?
I haven't done the best on every meal, and I've been overestimating a couple things, but I'm wondering if in my, well, I like missed this meal, I'll just put 1,000 here just to be safe. I wonder if I am overcompensating, like, or not overcompensating, but it's like, oh, I'll like have something else because I've already overcounted it earlier, and then maybe I'm actually off. Could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those where, I find that the days, the weeks, time periods that I don't religiously track and I try to ballpark it and go, feels good, like I think I'm fine, is usually when the numbers don't go in the direction I want to go. Now, I'll also say this. Are you generally just weighing yourself once a week?
I'm still doing the Thursday night right before we record.
Yeah, and so that's another thing. Like, as we've talked about before, your weight can fluctuate based on what you ate for lunch that day and how much gas it's producing in your body, or the sodium content and water retention. So, I mean, one other thing, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not. I weigh myself every day, and obviously that can get problematic if it causes you to make a shift every day or try to make up for a bad day kind of thing. Because I'm much more a believer in, like, you can have a bad day and then get back to your process and keep your process the same and just try to get better at sticking to your process. And then if you consistently stick to your process, you'll get much better results than trying to get it all back. But the weighing every day can give you more snapshots in time that, like, if you weighed yesterday, maybe you were 191, right? Instead of 193. Mm-hmm. And then today you didn't drink enough water. You drank too much water. Whatever the mechanism was that changed things a little bit, it could be off. Yeah. Again, I would say this with the caveat of, like, if you're doing everything else, right? If you're tracking all the calories in and out and the numbers feel like they should be going down and they're not, then I would say introduce more data points to make sure the numbers aren't going down. But
I in the past would weigh myself more often, and psychologically that wasn't the best for me.
Mm-hmm. I hear that.
Having I know that every Thursday I'm going to shower right before we record because that's how we bathe the kids. And I'd say, like, other than, like, we rarely ever skip a Thursday. So it's kind of just like a consistent, like, I know the last thing I'm going to one of the last things I'm going to do before we record is weigh myself. So it's like, that's just like the time I've, settled on.
And I get that.
And, like, it's, in theory, most weeks are similar for me with regard to how the week was. So,
I mean, we're talking about like 1% of your body weight. We're talking like roughly like 1.1% fluctuation in your weight.
Sure.
It could be anything.
It was a carb heavy week. That,
I think we could sit here speculating as much as we wanted to, because the simple answer could be just the calories were off, like the math didn't math for weight loss. And and I definitely, like I've mentioned before, especially on that Working on the Diet episode, the idea of weighing myself daily a year ago felt really dangerous because I was really afraid, until we started doing this segment, I was like intentionally not dieting because I needed to repair my relationship with food. And I still have to catch myself sometimes if the scale goes up tomorrow from what I saw today and not be like, I just need to eat an apple for lunch. Like, I legitimately used to do those kinds of things where it would just be like, okay, I'm not going to eat a lot today because I really need to kickstart my diet. Mm-hmm. It's so unhealthy. Yeah. But it's also really hard to fight, like, when you're in that and you're like trying really hard, because one of the things that's really, really freaking true about it, is like, what we've both been doing, which is to say, trying to lose weight for many months now. And like our total weight loss is not much, counted on our fingers, right? Like it's not much. It's mentally taxing too. And so there's something to it where for me, I have about 6 pounds to get to 180. I think based on sort of some various calculations, I think for me, 175 might eventually be where I want to end up, but probably not any lower than that. But I think what my goal is for the next like 6 weeks, I'm setting my calorie counter to losing a pound a week, see where we get to, but like trying my best to be diligent and saying, okay, this is 6 weeks that I'm cutting 500 calories a day. And then after I do that, I'm going to continue counting calories and I'm going to go to maintenance for a little while. And I'm going to stay at maintenance for at least 6 to 8 weeks. And then if I decide at that point that I want to go down to 175, doing it in a more staggered phase, because I think one of the things that I'm suffering from, and you're also probably suffering from, is like diet fatigue. Like even if you're not nailing it, it's like the psychological impact of like right, wrong, good, bad, gain, loss, like all these like positive and negative things where you're like, I'm trying. And like, even if you're not actually like trying because you're just like slamming beer and pizza and like you had a good breakfast and lunch and like you're still overeating, but you tried for 2/3 of the day every day for 8 months is a lot harder than trying 100% of the day every day for like 6 or 8 weeks and then putting a pause. And so I think that's the mentality that I'm going to try and do is like lose it in chunks for a little bit, then try to maintain, and then try to lose another chunk to just sort of offset some of that diet fatigue, because it's what I was saying before I was taking medication and why I set that goal of wanting to be 180 on my birthday that I didn't meet. Like, I'm fucking tired, man, of like doing this and like feeling like I'm trying to just lose a couple of pounds and like knowing that it's like the discipline and the fatigue getting to me. And I'm saying this having taken like 2-3 weeks of intentionally not cutting my calories, right? And like coming back and going, I don't care what the scale says when I get back. Like I'm not going to eat whatever I want, but I'm just not going to count my calories and I'm not going to be concerned about the weight gain. And then I'm just going to come back strong. And that has been refreshing to me, for me. And I don't know, I've come back. I feel like I've come back a lot stronger. Again, we're in like week 1 of not being on the medication, actually weighing myself again, doing all that stuff. So again, this is 1 week, but 5.5 more weeks to go and just like nail it down. And I think it's going to be one of those things where it's not like get to 180 and take a break. I think I really need to do like 6 weeks, whatever it is, take a break, maintain, come back to it, because it just like, and I get this for a lot of people, but and maybe that strategy doesn't work for everybody, but like diet fatigue is real, man. And it's one of the biggest reasons that people don't stick to them, because like it gets hard, it gets frustrating. You keep trying it and you keep like half-assing it a little bit because you're kind of tired of doing it anyway. You don't want to be doing it, but you want the results of it. And so I'm just like, fine.
Yeah, the fatigue is definitely kicking in, the fluctuation up and down essentially, but like staying pretty much within a 2-pound range has been pretty frustrating because again, maybe it is like a 2/3 of the day trying thing. I've always, my worst meal has always been dinner, because like I'm a lot more controlled during the day, like just because of schedules and like responsibilities and stuff.
Sure.
But it is frustrating. I think the most frustrating thing for me is like I did it before and it was so easy. When I didn't have a job, didn't have kids, and was going to the gym 2 hours every day. Things like just clicked, you know. But you know, life's a little different now, and it is harder. I'm not like giving up by any means, but it's definitely there's a mental wear and tear on the fact that I'm kind of just like stagnant. But we've gone on over an hour tonight. I think I want to appreciate everybody for taking the time. I'll be putting in an explicit tag on this episode because of Alex's F-bomb 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, we should probably just put an explicit tag to be safe on all of them. I never know what comes out of our mouths until I watch it back. Yeah. I just kind of black out and talk.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, as always, thanks so much for working on the Dad Pod with us. Another reminder, please like and subscribe. Please share with your friends, particularly other dads or parents at all. To our 2 loyalist listeners, dads, we love you. My mom has officially caught up on every episode too, so shout out to my mom. And yeah. Anyway, thanks everybody. Good night.
See you guys. Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.
You know, the little one, she now is saying multiple words together and stringing complete thoughts. It's pretty cool. Like, shower, all done.